The Power of Dignity. How Jasmine Crockett Silenced a Room. There were 8 chairs on that stage in Austin. 8 carefully selected individuals at a youth policy forum called Tomorrow's Leaders, Today's Choices. The panel was supposed to be a blend of firebrands and experienced voices, broadcast live across 3 platforms. Jasmine Crockett sat near the center, poised and prepared. Known for her composure and precision, she had learned early that being the only black woman in the room didn't mean being the loudest. It meant being undeniable. To her left sat Karoline Leavitt, younger, visibly eager, and known for political one-liners designed to spark reactions. She wore the kind of smile that dared you to disagree. The moderator, a graying radio host from Waco, guided them through predictable questions about education policy and youth violence until he pivoted. "What did your parents teach you about leadership?" Karoline grabbed the mic first. "I come from strong stock," she said with a light chuckle. "My parents are small business owners in New Hampshire. They taught me to speak my mind and not apologize for it." Then it happened. Karoline turned to Jasmine with a grin that didn't reach her eyes and said, "So, Jasmine, where's your mom from? Africa?" The room cracked, not with laughter, not exactly. A few people chuckled uncertainly. One panelist looked down. The moderator blinked, unsure whether to intervene. Jasmine didn't flinch. She turned slowly toward Karoline, not to confront her, just to see her fully. But before she could speak, something else happened. From the back of the room, beyond the audience, a woman stood up. She had been seated quietly alone, hands in her lap, a maroon shawl wrapped over her shoulders. She didn't speak. She didn't glare. She just stood, her chin high, her presence immediately shifting the air in the room. Everyone looked, not at Karoline, not at Jasmine, but at the woman standing silently in the back. Jasmine didn't turn to look. She already knew. That was her mother. The silence stretched as Karoline, suddenly unsure of herself, adjusted in her seat and cleared her throat. Jasmine slowly lifted the mic, and for the first time that evening, her voice entered the room. "I could answer your question," she said finally, "but that would mean accepting the way you asked it." Karoline's smile had thinned. Her hands were now clasped tightly in her lap. "You asked where my mother is from," Jasmine continued, voice steady. "Not because you care about her story, but because you thought it would reduce mine." The moderator stayed still. He knew better than to jump in now. "She's from Tuskegee, Alabama," Jasmine said, her eyes locked on Karoline. "Not Africa, though if she were, I'd say it just the same with pride. But you didn't ask because you didn't know. You asked because you assumed she didn't belong in this conversation." People were leaning in now, some even forgetting to blink. She cleaned houses in high school to help feed her younger siblings. She waited tables at a diner, where the owner made her use the back entrance. She raised me while working night shifts as a nurse, and still managed to volunteer at every PTA meeting. Jasmine turned her head toward the back of the room, and she's sitting right there, standing, actually. All eyes followed hers. Her mother didn't move, didn't wave, just stood proud and still. That woman taught me that dignity doesn't require a stage or a mic or even a response. Karoline gave a nervous laugh. Too late, too out of sync with the moment. My mother survived what she did, so I could sit in this chair today. So I could answer foolish questions with real stories. So I could remind you and everyone watching that who you are doesn't come from a zip code or a skin tone, or how perfectly you perform for people who already made up their minds. She paused, let it settle. She's not from Africa. She's from strength. A beat passed, and that was when it hit the room. This wasn't a clapback. It wasn't a moment of getting even. It was clarity, the kind that strips away pretense and leaves only truth. Karoline blinked quickly, reached for her water bottle, but knocked it instead. A soft clink against the metal table. She went for a chuckle, but it didn't land. It wasn't cruelty that shut her down. It was the absence of it. Jasmine hadn't gone for the throat. She had told the truth, and the truth didn't need sharpening. You know, Jasmine continued calmly, people like to throw around the word diversity on panels like this, especially when there are cameras. They want us here. They just don't want to be changed by what we say. She wasn't looking at Karoline anymore, but at the audience, students, educators, policy wonks. Some had leaned forward. Some weren't even blinking. And when you ask a question like that, you're not just trying to be funny. You're testing boundaries, seeing how far you can go without consequences, because you assume I won't respond in a way that makes you uncomfortable. Her voice didn't rise, but her words pressed. They stayed in people's minds. My mom used to tell me, your silence will be misunderstood more than your voice will ever be respected. But she also told me, choose the moment when you speak. Make it cost something. A young man in the front row nodded slightly and whispered, this is real. I'm not here because I want people to like me. I'm not here to make everyone feel comfortable. I'm here because I work for it. And my mother, she sacrificed for it. And when someone tries to flatten her story into a punchline, I owe her more than silence. Jasmine glanced at Karoline again. Let me tell you something about that woman standing back there. She wasn't born with much, but she had a spine made of steel. She raised me in a house where we didn't always have heat in winter, but we had books. We had values. We had conversations, not always polite ones, real ones. Someone clapped. Just one person. Then a few others joined. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't organized, but it was honest. Jasmine raised her hand lightly to quiet them. Don't clap for me, she said. Clap for her. She's the reason I'm up here. And she did it without ever needing to embarrass someone to make herself look better. She sat back slightly. I didn't come here to teach anyone a lesson, but sometimes a lesson shows up whether you're ready or not. Then Jasmine revealed her mother's past.
My mother, her name is Althea Josephine Grant, grew up in Tuskegee in the 1960s. She went to a school where her textbooks were hand-me-downs from the all-white school across town. Pages torn, answers already scribbled in. She didn't complain. She read it twice. A hush fell over the crowd. She was 12 when she watched her father, my grandfather, get turned away from voting, not because he wasn't eligible, but because they told him the ballot box had already closed, even though it hadn't. Jasmine looked down for a second, then back up. She never forgot that. She told me, you'll vote for the both of us one day. Her voice cracked just a little, enough to make it human. But she didn't stop. When she was 16, she marched in Montgomery. Not for headlines, but because the school cafeteria ran out of milk for the black students 3 days a week, while the white school down the street had extra cartons to throw out. That's enough to march for, she said. Karoline sat stiffly, her confidence crumbling under this kind of clarity. There's this idea, Jasmine said evenly, that ignorance gets a free pass if it comes dressed as a joke. She turned her full attention to Karoline. Now, some people call it humor, sarcasm. They say, relax. It's not that deep. But it is. It always is. Because people like my mother lived through the consequences of other people's jokes. Karoline tried to meet Jasmine's gaze but blinked away. She wasn't smiling anymore. I'm not interested in canceling you, Jasmine said, voice steady. I don't need you to apologize. What we need, is for you to understand that your joke landed on a history you don't carry. Karoline shifted in her chair, hands now clasped tighter than before. She looked toward the moderator, then quickly down at her notes. You know what's hard? Raising a daughter in a world that pretends to be post-racial but still checks your name twice on a job application. You know what's even harder? Watching someone diminish your mother's existence to a punchline in front of strangers and cameras just to stir the pot. The room was completely still. Nobody coughed. Nobody shifted. She didn't come here today to be seen, Jasmine said, glancing again toward the back. But now that she's standing, I want everyone in this room to remember that image. A woman who didn't speak a word but still said everything. The moderator tried to resume. All right, we'll take a few questions from the audience, he said, his voice thinner than before. But everyone's attention was already shifting to Karoline. She stood slowly, tried to fix her blazer, smoothed her hair behind one ear. She whispered something to the moderator, who nodded. She gathered her things, notes, phone, the half-empty bottle, and walked toward the side stairs. No excuse, no explanation. She simply left. No one blocked her path. No one called after her. They just watched as her heels hit the floor of the auditorium with sharp, quick taps that sounded more dramatic than intended. Then she was gone. Someone whispered, "Wow." Another said, "She really left." A young woman, no older than 19, stood up with a notebook. "Congresswoman Crockett, how do you stay centered when you know you've just been targeted?" Jasmine looked at her for a long second. "I remember who I'm really talking to," she replied. "It's not always the person who threw the insult. Sometimes it's the people watching, wondering what they would have done in my shoes. Sometimes it's the young woman in the crowd asking the hard questions. That's who I speak to. And that's how I stay centered. I speak through it, not because of it." Althea, her mother, finally began to sit back down slowly, as if the weight she had carried quietly all night could finally rest. Jasmine caught her eye and gave her a tiny nod just for her. As the questions continued, Jasmine delivered her final message. "I've been on panels where people talked over me, ignored me, or called me articulate like it was a surprise," she said. "But what I want young people to understand is this. You don't have to match ignorance with anger. You don't even have to match it at all. You just have to keep showing up as yourself, unapologetically." She turned to the moderator. "We talk about leadership like it's something polished, like it wears a certain suit or speaks a certain way or has a certain pedigree, but the truth is, most of the best leaders I know never had a platform. They led from their kitchens, from the back of church buses, from hospital break rooms, from library steps. They led without being asked." "My mother didn't have a college degree," Jasmine said, glancing at the back of the room again. "But she gave me everything a degree can't teach. Discipline, self-respect, and the ability to walk through rooms that weren't built for me and still take up space. And what I want to say to every young person watching is this: don't wait to be invited. Don't wait to be approved. Just show up. Show up for your truth. Show up for your story. And when someone tries to reduce you to a stereotype, you don't have to yell. Just tell the truth loud enough to be remembered." There was a pause. Then, for the first time since standing, her mother finally spoke. She didn't need a microphone, but the room heard her just the same. "She was born with a voice," Althea said. "I just made sure she never forgot how to use it." The audience rose, not because they were told to stand, but because they knew something sacred had just happened. Applause erupted, not wild, not desperate, just full, real. By the next morning, the clip had circulated widely. Not the whole panel, just that one exchange. Karoline's question, Jasmine's pause, her mother rising, and the response. It spread because it wasn't outrage, it was clarity. It wasn't explosive, it was clean, sharp, felt. In Kansas City, a black mother showed the clip to her teenage daughter over breakfast. In Albuquerque, a professor played it before class and asked her students what respect really looks like. In Toledo, a young woman saved the video to remind herself how to hold her ground with grace. This wasn't just a moment. It became a mirror. Because everyone has their version of that stage. Everyone has been Jasmine at some point. And unfortunately, many have also sat silently when they saw a Karoline say something that didn't sit right. But what Jasmine showed wasn't just strength. It was direction. She didn't cancel anyone. She didn't humiliate anyone. She simply told the truth and let the room do the rest. And her mother, Althea, without a speech, without credentials, reminded us all that sometimes your greatest act of resistance is just standing there, refusing to shrink, refusing to play along. So here's the question. When the moment comes, and it will you stay seated, or will you stand? Will you crack a joke to stay comfortable, or will you listen and learn something uncomfortable that makes you grow? Because someone will always be watching. A daughter. A student. A stranger in the back row. Speak truth, even if your voice shakes. And when you do, don't do it for applause. Do it so someone else watching knows they can do it, too.